Well, I'm excited to be here with you today to talk all about the cell membrane with my friends, over at Systemic Formulas. This is going to be a very important topic. We're going to get into epigenetics, genetics, and the innate intelligence that sits within your cells. I'm going to share a few protocols that I use with my clients all over the world to support membrane function, some of the fats we want to avoid, and much, much more. So without further ado, let's get right into this presentation. I like to start with this study. Some of you may know this study. This was in 2018, a study from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. They wanted to look at America and how healthy or unhealthy America was and currently is. And they found with their study, looking at blood pressure, medication, triglycerides, BMI, and other metrics, that only 12% of American adults are metabolically healthy, meaning 88% of American adults are metabolically unhealthy. So we have a big challenge, but that means we also have a big opportunity. And life begins and ends at the cell membrane. You're going to learn about that very, very soon. There's some other stats out there regarding diabetes. Some of you might know, have patients who are diabetic or a family member or a friend. We know that 60% of Americans are diabetic or pre-diabetic, which leads to heart disease. 68% of them end up with heart disease. 16% end up with a stroke. 70% end up with neuropathy, which is really painful nerves with their feet, their toes, and sometimes their fingers. And the above stats apply to those who are on medication. That's where a lot of people don't really get it. Just because you're on medication doesn't make you exempt from these statistics. But if you could find a way to support the membrane, that is how you tackle the cause instead of focusing on just the effect like medication and surgery does. There's some other stats out there regarding cancer. 1 in 3 women are diagnosed with cancer in the US, 1 in 2 for men. I already gave that middle stat. And then it's predicted in 10 years, which is in 2032, 1 in 2 children will be born on the autism spectrum. So we got a battle. And we know there's 2 types of people in the world. We have 90%, the 97%ers who are looking for shortcuts, toxic pills, toxic or rapid weight loss surgery. They're looking for shortcuts. They have microwave thinking. But then we have us, the 3%ers, who know there's cause and effect. Symptoms are a blessing because it's showing the body's giving you signals that something is wrong. So we open up the hood and we look underneath to see what's going on. And it's a lifestyle change. And that's what this conversation is going to be about. It's about changing your lifestyle with habits, with foods, nutrition, and supporting the membrane. I like this quote. I love this quote from Alvin Toffler. He said, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and then relearn." A lot of the information we've been taught over the years, we have to unlearn and then relearn the right information. When we think about allopathic medicine, conventional medicine, of course, there's a time and place for that. But a lot of the nutrition part, the supplement part of that piece has failed us. And we have to unpack that information, unlearn that information, and actually learn real information that helps the body heal itself. Einstein said, "Intellectuals solve problems, geniuses prevent them." You right now watching this, you're a genius and you're going to empower all of your patients and clients to become geniuses themselves. So let's get right into this. The innate intelligence. Most of you watching this are probably chiropractors. So you really understand this language of the innate intelligence. For the general public, when they hear that word innate intelligence, they're not really sure what that is or where that is in the human body. The innate intelligence, to me, is the world's greatest healer, physician, chiropractor, health coach, and it sits within the human body. It is the wisdom of the human body that helps the body heal and overcome diagnoses and overcome symptoms and achieve a long, healthy life. There is no pill or surgery that could substitute this innate intelligence that sits within the 50 to 70 trillion cells in your body. Now, for many years, it was thought, some people still believe this, that the innate intelligence sits within your DNA nucleus. And if that's your premise, that's a big problem because you are pretty much a victim of heredity. Cancer runs in your family, you got cancer genes, Nothing you can do about that. Just a matter of time before you're diagnosed with cancer. You could say the same thing about diabetes or Alzheimer's and autoimmune disease. And if that's your premise, you have a victim mindset and there's really no hope with you. But if your premise is that we have an innate intelligence that communicates with your DNA, that could turn on genes and turn them off, and there's something called epigenetics, then you're not a victim of your heredity. You're a victor of your future, and you have much, much more control. So for several years, the premise from scientists is that your DNA is where the intelligence of your body lives. But there was a scientist named Dr. Bruce Lipton and other brilliant world-renowned cell biologists who wanted to challenge that premise. And what they did was an experiment in a laboratory setting. And this is not just Dr. Bruce Lipton. It's been duplicated several times. What they did is they looked at the cells inside of the human body, and they removed the DNA nucleus from the cell, and they wanted to see what happened. They removed the DNA nucleus, and the cell lived for 2 months, sometimes even longer, before it went rogue and went through apoptosis, which is cell death. That goes to show me, and it went to go show the scientists doing this experiment, that the intelligence of the cells is not actually the DNA, it's something else. So they wanted to find out, okay, if it's not the DNA nucleus, something else is controlling the DNA nucleus. What is it? So they removed the cell membrane, and then poof, the cell died instantly. And they duplicated that process, removed the membrane, instant death. Remove the membrane, instant death. That means the intelligence, the innate intelligence, sits within the cell membrane. And we know the membrane, life begins and ends at the cell membrane. It's kind of like a bodyguard for your cells. It communicates with your DNA to turn on genes, turn them off. And if you could support that membrane, you're going to live a long, healthy life. And I'm going to teach you and share with you how I support the membrane of myself and all of the clients that I work with. So let's get right into the membrane. I mean, Dr. Bruce Lipton calls it the membrane because it's so important. Every membrane has these receptor sites. They're called integral membrane proteins. It's this right here that you see me kind of going over with my cursor. And these are kind of like cell phone antenna signals. They're receiving, or cell phone antennas, I should say, they're receiving signals to produce a specific job. So in general, the signals that your cell membrane receptor sites are receiving are from your hormones, nutrients, oxygen, and even your thoughts. Those membranes, the receptor sites, are integrated into the membrane, and whatever is communicating with that receptor site, actually there's 30,000 receptor sites on one cell, goes into the cell and tells your DNA to produce a specific job. So in general, here's how it works. There's an environmental stimulus, which binds to the cell membrane receptor sites. That creates a chemical reaction inside of the cell that reaches the DNA nucleus. Once that happens, a gene becomes expressed as a protein. Now let's rewind this process real quickly. Environmental stimulus. Let's say it's healthy food, healthy supplements, some of the systemic supplements I'm going to explain. Healthy thoughts, chemical reaction inside the nucleus, a gene becomes expressed as a protein. That protein will be anti-inflammatory and healing to the body. But let's say it's toxic food, bad fats, which I'm going to discuss. You're not supplementing the right way. You have stinking thinking, negative thoughts, hateful thoughts. Well, that environmental stimulus still creates a chemical reaction, but now the gene that's expressed is an inflammatory protein leading to an inflammatory response. Dr. Bruce Lipton believes that, genetics play a role, but he believes 99% control, or I should reword that. He believes that we have 99% control over the expression of the genes that we have by the environmental stimulus. The foods we eat, the supplements we take or don't take, the thoughts we think, the toxins around us, etc. We have much, much control over that. So I'm going to share with you how I support the membrane strategically and focus on that membrane. Keep in mind, there is a cell membrane around your cells, and then there's a mitochondrial membrane, inner membrane, and outer. There's a double membrane there, which I'm going to talk about. But in general, we have two sources of fuel available for your cells: glucose and ketones. If you follow my work, you know I'm a big fan of ketosis, and this lecture is not going to be a deep dive into keto, but I am going to share why ketones need to be used to really lower inflammation, and harness this innate intelligence. Now, it's a very simple process. Nothing new about keto. It's just nuance. Ketosis has been around for as long as humans have existed. I lectured at Systemic Formulas last year in Park City. And if you watch that lecture, I went deep into ketosis. If not, you could probably get that lecture to watch. But here in general, how it works, we lower our carbohydrate intake. And when we do that, we lower glucose and insulin in the body. That's a good thing for most people. As you lower glucose and insulin, you're able to mobilize and start burning body fat, which is the stored energy that we have on the body. And when we start mobilizing body fat, because we drop glucose and insulin, that body fat is shuttled to your liver, this soccer mom organ, and the liver produces ketones. You have acetoacetate, which is expelled in the urine. You have beta hydroxybutyrate in the blood, and then acetone in the breath. In general, that's how it works. Now, keto is not a diet. It's a metabolic process. It's a very important process we want to tap into, especially when it comes to supporting your mitochondrial membrane. Now, Dr. Pompa, most of you know who this is. He's my mentor. I work with him, the most brilliant person in the health space. He said, if you want to get well, you got to fix the cell. And we're focusing on the cell membrane, this lipid bilayer made up of protein, saturated fat, and cholesterol. Yeah, that's what it's made of. Now, inside of your cells, you have the mitochondrion, which is one mitochondria. The mitochondria are very, very important. Think of them as, you already know this. It's kind of like just teaching you what you already know here. But the mitochondria are kind of like the engine of your vehicles. If your engine was not working, if you didn't have an engine, vehicle's not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. If you don't have mitochondria, no life. The mitochondria produces ATP, which is energy. And the question for you, just thinking this in your head here, what do you think? Which cells in the human body do you think have the highest concentration of these energy power plants? It's the brain, it's the eyeballs, it's the heart, it's the ovaries. Now, the brain has about 2 million mitochondria in a single cell. The ovaries have about 100,000 mitochondria in a single cell. And then it goes down and down and down. Other cells have a few hundred to 1,000, but this is how amazing the human body is. The number one priority for the human body is survival. So it makes sense that the cells that need to be used the most for survival, the brain, the eyes, the heart, ovaries, reproduction, have the highest concentration of mitochondria. Fascinating little fact there. Every disease, pretty much every disease, is linked to mitochondria dysfunction. This is just a common list of mitochondrial disease, but any disease somebody might be dealing with, whether it's diabetes or cancer, look at their mitochondria and they have unhealthy mitochondria, including this list here, which is a long list of diseases and symptoms. Now, in general, here's how it works. Your mitochondria could use glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids, and it produces ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Think of ATP as the energy currency of your cells, the gasoline of your cells. The engine is the mitochondria, the ATP is the gasoline. Now, let me ask you this question. Which vehicle do you think will get you farther? The one on the left, which is a cell that's only burning glucose and sugar, never tapping into ketosis, or this badass car on the right? Of course, looking at this photo, we know it's the one on the right, but how does that make sense from a biochemical standpoint? Biochemistry, here we go. When glucose is being used by your mitochondria and your cells, there's about 32 to 36 ATP produced. Simple biochemistry. If you go back to your biochemistry textbooks, it'll show that. Now, ketones give you 4 times more the energy, the ATP, 120 to 160 ATP produced. Now, this might be problematic because, let me go back for a second. This might be problematic because, yes, burning more energy sounds like a good thing. But when you burn more energy, you create more smoke. If I burned more firewood in my room here, I would create more smoke. Yeah, I'd have more energy, more firepower, but then there would be more smoke. So it sounds like it's a bad thing to be producing more ATP, but this is where it gets super fascinating. Ketones signal to the mitochondria to make more of themselves, mitogenesis. That's why when we go back to this PowerPoint, you produce more ATP because you are creating more mitochondria, mitogenesis. Now, still, it sounds like it might be a bad thing because producing that energy is expensive, just like the gasoline these days in the United States. It's a high demand and it creates more smoke. But here's the cool thing about ketones versus glucose. Now, when the mitochondria within your cells is only burning sugar and not using ketones, the 32 to 36, that's the ATP that's created, will create some cellular smoke, some free radicals, reactive oxygen species. And your cells and your mitochondria have a hard time keeping up with the amount of fire, a smoke going on in that cell. It's similar to this firefighter who has to put out a whole fire all by himself. But if your cells are producing ketones and the mitochondria are using ketones, although you have more smoke to deal with, you have a fleet of firefighters ready to put out the fire as soon as the smoke is being produced. That's the analogy. Now, let's get into the science of it. Now, when you look at studies out there, this makes sense because if ketones help your mitochondria produce more ATP, but more ATP creates more free radicals, then why do all these studies show ketones lower free radicals and lower inflammation? I'm going to get some more into that, but here's a study that proves that. Here's another study that shows ketone body stress response and redox homeostasis is just showing that it lowers free radicals. These are two interesting studies that came out several years ago from the Buck Institute and then Newman and Verdon and then John Ramsey, UC Davis and the Buck Institute. So on the left here, both of these studies were done on mice. On the left here, the yellow is the ketogenic diet, and it showed that a ketogenic diet extended the lifespan of the mice towards the later part of their life. On the right here, the red also showed the ketogenic diet extended lifespan towards midlife. Now, that was duplicated and it was super interesting, but that was done in mice, not humans. Now, when we think about humans, here's a study that showed the oxidative stress was suppressed by beta hydroxybutyrate, which is a ketone body. Now, how does that make sense? If it's creating more energy and more smoke, but we see lowering in inflammation, how does that make sense? Here's the analogy, and here's how it works. Now, this is an analogy I got from Dr. Stephen Gundry, who I interviewed on my Keto Kamp podcast. He has a great book, Unlocking the Keto Code. But ketones signal to the mitochondria to uncouple. Okay, here's the analogy. If you think about a pressure cooker, when there's too much steam and too much heat in that pressure cooker, there's a release valve that releases excess steam to maintain homeostasis. Your mitochondria have 5 pressure release valves, and ketones communicate with your mitochondria to get rid of these free radicals, excess reactive oxygen species. That's how amazing the innate intelligence is. You're producing more energy because you're using ketones, but that excess free radicals are now very efficiently being released outside of the mitochondria membrane. So ketones must be used. Who do you want protecting your cells and your mitochondria? Do you want McLovin from Superbad? That's akin to glucose. Or do you want the Secret Service protecting your mitochondria and your membranes? Of course, we want ketones. Now, here's some additional support. When we talk about mitochondria uncoupling, yeah, ketones can help you do that, but also there's some research that shows polyphenol-rich foods and ingredients like this supplement right here. So if you have somebody who has high inflammation, you're looking at their inflammatory markers, C-reactive protein, homocysteine, fibrinogen, fasting insulin, we need to get them into ketosis. But even if you're not utilizing ketosis, ROX is a fantastic supplement that I use. I throw in, especially with my clients have high inflammation. A lot of the ingredients in here have been shown to uncouple the mitochondria, meaning lowering the free radicals that from the energy produced in the cells. So the way I use it and the way I use it with my clients is 2 capsules twice per day, even better taken with the fatty meal. So ROX needs to be added to your protocol for lowering inflammation. Now, when it comes to nutrition, this is relevant whether you're doing keto, teaching keto or not. clean fats versus dirty fats. I'm going to share with you a whole set of fats that create more inflammation around your cell membrane than smoking, than sugar, than anything else out there when it comes to food. I interviewed two individuals on my Keto Kamp podcast a couple years ago. Dr. Kay Shanahan, who was the nutritionist for the Los Angeles Lakers when Kobe Bryant was there. She has the book Deep Nutrition. She's amazing. And then Brian Peskin, MIT researcher. And I asked them both the same question, but Brian Peskin specifically, I said, hey, what's worse for you? Eating these bad fats or smoking cigarettes each day? And according to his research, he said if somebody smoked 2 packs of cigarettes each day, the chances of them developing cancer within 28 years is about 16%. Then he said, if somebody consumed these vegetable oils every single day, the chances of them developing cancer and or heart disease within 28 years is about 86%. Yikes. When I asked Dr. Kay Shanahan if this research from Brian Peskin aligned with her research, she said, actually, Ben, the 86% of disease is closer to 100%. Here's why. So many studies show these bad fats called PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids. Now, the chemical structure, poly meaning many double bonds, and it has many opportunities to oxidize. If I bit into an apple and left it on the counter and it turned brown in a few hours, that's oxidation. This study showed persistent oxidative stress, often involving enhanced peroxidation of PUFAs in the cell membranes, are known to enhance the development of malignant diseases. Thus, the carcinogenic process can be initiated and or accelerated by lipid peroxidation-induced DNA and protein damage. This study looked at linoleic acid, which is that omega-6 PUFA, and it showed that linoleic acid increases endothelial dysfunction and inflammatory marker expression. It also asserts that diabetics have more linoleic acid in their LDL particles than non-diabetics. This study showed that corn oil, which is an omega-6 inflammatory fat, changed cardiac fatty acids and caused early diastolic dysfunction without altering systolic function. This is a very fascinating study looking at the mitochondria and using different fats to see how the mitochondria uses different fat sources. Essentially, what it showed is that PUFAs cannot be used for energy production anywhere near the way it can be used for monounsaturated fatty acids or saturated fatty acids. So think of PUFAs as cell death. Dr. Kay Shanahan says PUFAs go poof, inflammatory. So here's a list. Well, actually, here's a list of the ones we want to avoid in blue, which is the linoleic acid, but I'm going to give you more of a easier list for you to look at, which is this. Avoid the following fats. These are going to do a lot of damage to your cell membranes. It's estimated the half-life of these bad fats in your cell membranes and body fat, the half-life is about 2 years. Meaning if you remove them today, in about 2 years, half of them will still be around unless you do some of the tips I'm about to share with you right now. So canola, corn, soybean, cottonseed, safflower, peanut, sunflower, grapeseed, fish oil, rice bran oil. Now you can see there's two little asterisks there. Sunflower and grapeseed can be totally healthy if organic, cold pressed, but most of the time they're not. So let's talk about the healthier fats to switch to. And then you're going to want to supplement, which I'll share how I do that. Olive oil is great, much better for cooking than the omega-6 fats. Avocado oil, grass-fed butter, ghee, duck fat, lard, coconut oil, beef tallow. So yeah, make that swap. Have your clients and patients make that swap. But if you really want to support the membrane, you got to be even more strategic. So here's some additional membrane support. Everybody needs to do this. I do this with all of my clients and myself because it's almost impossible to avoid the omega-6 bad fat. So this will help with damage control and help your cells reduce inflammation at the membrane level. So I always use Vista 1, Vista 2. Now, Vista 2 supports the cell membrane, which is the outer membrane. Vista 1 supports the mitochondria membrane, the endoplasmic reticulum, and it has an herbalomic component, but it has the right ratios of omega-6 to omega-3 that are stable fats along with the herbalomic component. So I use 2 dropperfuls per day of Vista 2 and 2 pills per day Avista 1. They need to be taken together. That's very important. They both have different functions. I take them together and recommend them together. So this is very important, especially for those who are not doing what I just recommended of getting rid of the bad fats. Even if you have a patient who's not willing to get rid of the bad fats, adding in these good fats can be a great way to help with damage control. I also love Dr. Pompa's membrane shake. I kind of made an edit to this, but most of this is from Dr. Pompa. This is a great way to support membrane function, drinking this a few times per week. 1 cup of unsweetened coconut milk or macadamia nut milk, 1 tablespoon of raw pumpkin seeds, 1 tablespoon of raw pecans, 1 scoop of Systemic Formula's FBR, which is a great fiber source, 2 tablespoons of cacao powder, 1 scoop of Systemic Formula's ECM collagen powder. I love the ECM because it's actually, most collagen powders out there are not complete, but they have all the strands of collagen you need to make it a complete protein. And then 2 eggs with the yolk, a 1/3 cup of blueberries, and then if you want to add some stevia. This is a great way to support the membrane. It'll keep your patient full. It's healthy, lower inflammation. So I recommend this shake. I recommend testing glucose and ketones. If you're not doing already, if you're going to have them do ketosis, check their blood. Optimal ranges for glucose is 70 to 90 when you're fasted. Optimal ranges for ketones in general is 0.8 to 2.8. An hour after testing is also a great thing to do for your patients and clients. Ketones should be in the same range if they're doing a ketogenic diet. Glucose should be below 120, an hour after eating a meal. 2 hours after eating a meal, you want your glucose to drop below 100. If you have a patient who is insulin resistant, diabetic, pre-diabetic, they're not hitting the optimal numbers here, get them on this. Sinulin is very, very important. You could also use it even if you don't have blood sugar issues. I use this as more of an anti-aging tip. If I have a big carb meal and I'm flexing out of ketosis, I'll take a couple capsules of this. But blood sugar control is very important. If you want to age faster than anybody you know, have elevated glucose and insulin levels. So doing keto, doing intermittent fasting, adding in these supplements lowers glucose and insulin in the body. We know this product assists in the biochemical regulation, not just fat, carbs, but also protein metabolism. So the way I take it, 2 capsules before each meal. The way I recommend it to my clients, 2 capsules before each meal, especially if that meal has carbohydrates. And that is the protocol for supporting your cell membrane. Remember, life begins and life ends at the cell membrane. I hope you could teach ketosis and mitochondrial uncoupling to your patients. I hope you get in these supplements to support membrane function and blood sugar support. If you want to connect with me on any of my social media platforms, I'm on YouTube, Keto Kamp on YouTube, Instagram at the Ben Azadi, TikTok at the Ben Azadi, and then the Keto Kamp podcast. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys very soon.